Welcome to the Vital Spirit podcast. I'm Dr. Kelly Livingston, a naturopathic physician and your guide to a new health reality, one that connects body, mind, and spirit. Together, we'll dive deep into the art and science of holistic healing. Through working with hundreds of women through midlife transitions, I've discovered something profound. Most of our physical and emotional challenges are rooted in a maladaptive stress response. And true healing begins when we regulate our nervous system. Each episode will explore complex health topics in simple, empowering ways, uncover the deeper wisdom within each of us, and share practical tools for nervous system regulation to help you awaken your vital force and create lasting wellness. So, if you're ready to reconnect with yourself, your health, and your purpose, let's begin this journey together so you can experience life more fully human and deeply healed. If you're waking at 3 a.m., hot, anxious, wide awake, with your mind racing or even your heart racing, please know this. You are not broken, and you are definitely not alone. So many of you wanted me to do an episode on sleep, and in particular on sleep and energy, which of course are linked, right? And these are two of the most common symptoms that women come into my office experiencing, either difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep, or having low energy throughout the day to complete all of the tasks ahead. So your circadian rhythm, your hormones, and your nervous system are asking for a recalibration if you're struggling with sleep and your body is telling you something. So today, we're going to talk about one of the most powerful yet most neglected medicines of all, sleep. Welcome back to the Vital Spirit podcast, where we explore the deep connections between mind, body, and spirit in healing. I'm Dr. Kelly Livingston, a naturopathic physician and owner of Root Steep Medicine Clinic and creator of the Vital Spirit Method. Today, we're talking about sleep, play, and relaxation, the forgotten medicines of midlife. Did you know that nearly 75 million Americans struggle with sleep? And for women in midlife, this challenge carries unique meaning. You see, this is often the season where we finally get our brains back at night. I'm sure many of you can relate to that feeling when the kids have gone to sleep, you're done with your work for the day, and all of a sudden it's you time. Maybe the house is really quiet, and even though your to-do list is long, you've got all these great creative ideas. Or maybe you're like me, and it's finally time for you to be able to lay down on your yoga mat and do a couple gentle stretches. Regardless, this is when we start cutting into our sleep time, and sleep is really foundational to healing. So in this Sleep Masterclass episode, we'll explore the science and spirit of sleep as a seed of health, your circadian rhythm and system, hormones and the HPA axis, emotional and social roots of insomnia in midlife, parasympathetic rituals to restore your sleep rhythm, and how play, laughter, and inner child work become medicine for rest. Recently, I saw an Instagram post that a colleague and friend of mine made, and she'll also be a guest on the podcast. I'm really excited for that. And it was all about learning how to cultivate our relaxation muscle. And I just loved that. I reached out to her and I said, that's such a good way to put it. And she said that patients have been really receptive to that lately. So I just want to plant that seed in your mind that learning how to relax is actually something that a lot of women need to do. So many of you come into my office, and when I ask if you feel like your body's able to relax, the answer is no. If your body can't relax, it makes sense that your body's not able to sleep, right? So why is sleep so important? Why did I decide that sleep was going to be a seed of health? You see, sleep is not passive. We're not just sleeping. It might look like we're not doing much, right? But so much is going on. It's one of the most active healing processes we have in our body. During sleep, your lymphatic system, which is your brain's detoxification network, washes away metabolic waste, inflammatory byproducts, and even amyloid proteins that can contribute to cognitive decline. Your brain actually shrinks while you're sleeping and is bathed in this detox fluid, which I just think is so amazing. Sleep is when your body heals tissues and balances inflammation, consolidates memories and builds new learning, restores neurotransmitters and immune cells, balances ghrelin, leptin, cortisol, and insulin, which are all really important for metabolism. And sleep helps regulate your emotional stability. We all know that feeling of not having slept well the night before and feeling like we're emotionally dysregulated or easily triggered. We won't get super in depth into sleep architecture here, but non REM sleep, that deep, slow wave stage, is when we're physically repairing, while REM sleep is when we're integrating emotions and learning. So, this is why chronic sleep deprivation will absolutely lead to mood instability, poor focus, and metabolic changes. I love this quote from Matthew Walker, who wrote Why We Sleep, which I highly recommend. And he says that inadequate sleep, even moderate reductions for just 1 week, disrupts blood sugar levels so profoundly that you would be classified as pre diabetic. That's wild, right? And that's just the beginning. Long term sleep loss increases cardiovascular risk, weakens immune defense, and accelerates aging. In naturopathic medicine, we see sleep as one of the core vis medicatrix naturae processes, right? One of the foundational pieces that we work on. It is when the vital force or your vis regenerates itself. So it is absolutely foundational to health. It's why it is one of our seeds of health. And if you want, you can go back to our initial episodes about what the seeds of health are in the first place. So let's talk about our circadian system, or the clock within us. And we definitely did a deep dive on the HPA axis where we talked all about circadian rhythm in our 2-part deep dive on the HPA axis series, where I answered the question, is hormone replacement therapy right for me? So I highly recommend that you go back and check those out. So sleep is governed by your circadian rhythm, which is your 24-hour internal clock, orchestrated by light and timing. You're going to hear me say this over and over. Morning sunlight enters through your retina and it signals to your suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is the master clock of your hypothalamus, to set the day's rhythm. So this begins something called your cortisol awakening response, or CAR, which we can even test. And it's gently going to raise alertness while telling melatonin to release about 14 to 16 hours later. So literally your sleep for this night, so my sleep tonight, is based on my light exposure this morning. This is so key. At night, when light dims, melatonin rises and cortisol falls down. So there's this dance between these two hormones, cortisol and melatonin, that's happening. So cortisol comes up in the morning, it peaks, then it starts to drop, then melatonin comes up at night. And as this dance is happening, your body is getting the signal to sleep or to be awake. So the dance between these hormones shapes everything from digestion to hormone production to mood to sleep timing. And disruption of this circadian rhythm, whether it's through screen time, late meals, erratic sleep times, has been linked to so many health issues. When your circadian rhythm is disrupted, you will see metabolic syndrome, you will see depression and anxiety, you will see hormone dysregulation, you will see cardiovascular and immune disorders, and premature aging. We don't want any of these things, right? So your circadian rhythm is not just about sleep. It's a whole body symphony. Remember the conductor and the orchestra from that HPA axis deep dive. And light is the conductor. Light is telling your body, now is time to be awake. Now is time to sleep. That's why all of us who are on screens all the time are really seeing an impact in our sleep if we're not careful around this. Now, not everyone's clock runs the same, right? So I often talk about 4 different chronotypes. So you have the lions, the early risers. This is only about 10 to 20% of the population, and they really feel best focused before noon. So you're getting most of your mental focus work or energy focused work done before noon. And then you have the bears, which is about 50% of the population, and their natural rhythm really aligns with sunrise and sunset. And that's kind of how I'll generally describe circadian rhythm. You also have the wolves, who are creative night owls, and they're most alert in the evening. This is my natural chronotype. I work really hard to have a healthy circadian rhythm. I struggled with insomnia for a lot of my life. And then you have the dolphins, which is only about 10% of the population, and they're really irregular sleepers. They're light sensitive, they're prone to insomnia. So sometimes knowing your chronotype really helps you to structure your eating, your exercise, your work patterns that match your natural energy curve rather than fighting it. So if you want to get really nuanced with this, you can start to journal the times that you would naturally fall asleep and wake up if you weren't intervening. And you can start to understand, even by reflecting back and look and thinking back to childhood, were you a night owl or were you an early bird and morning person? And yes, this can shift with hormones and age. For perimenopausal women, our cortisol rhythms sometimes flatten, especially if we've been excessively producing cortisol or living in a high stress environment or have a history of chronic or traumatic stress. And we might see that impacts our melatonin. And we absolutely might notice that we're waking at 2, 3, 4 a.m. The most important thing to remember here is that keeping a regular sleep wake time is key for circadian health. So start to figure out what that ideal time is for you and stick with it. In general, I'm usually asking patients to be asleep around 10 p.m. and awake around 6 a.m. But this is going to be different for everyone, and it is going to change throughout our lives. So, why do so many women notice in their 30s and 40s that sleep is starting to tank? Why is sleep impacted in perimenopause? Well, hormone fluctuations often turn sleep from restorative to restless. We've talked all about progesterone, right? And how progesterone naturally supports GABA, which is our calming inhibitory neurotransmitter. It's the neurotransmitter that helps us to feel calm and that helps us to sleep. When it drops, so when progesterone's dropping during perimenopause, we're losing that tranquilizing effect. So it's why one of the first symptoms women will experience is sleep disturbances and irritability. You also have the fact that estrogen, remember, is doing that wild up, down roller coaster of the toddler on the light switch. We talked about this in our episode, What is Perimenopause Anyway? So, estrogen, which is sometimes surging and dropping, influences serotonin and melatonin. So, as it fluctuates, we can experience more waking in the middle of the night, more mood swings, hot flashes, and night sweats, which can wake us. And so, in your biochemical kind of sleep processes, tryptophan becomes serotonin and melatonin. So, that's why you might hear me talk about 5-HTP or tryptophan for serotonin and melatonin support during perimenopause. But we're also keeping in mind GABA, that calming inhibitory neurotransmitter, as well. Now, on top of progesterone declining and estrogen being a bit erratic, cortisol can invert. So instead of it dropping at night, some women will experience that cortisol is actually rising at night and then dropping in the morning. And this can create that tired but wired feeling or pattern. And early cortisol spikes can account for so much of that middle of the night waking that women experience in perimenopause. And you add to this the psychological and social load of midlife, so the external stressors, such as your career is at its peak, or your kids are dealing with their own stressors. Maybe they're going from toddlerhood into preteen and teen stress, and that has a whole boatload of stress that comes with it, right? I have a 10-year-old daughter, so we're starting to feel some of those hormones fluctuate in her as my own hormones are fluctuating through my perimenopause because I'm 43. So aging parents also in this phase of life are maybe needing more care. Maybe there are different financial pressures and that unrelenting buzz of technology, right? Turn those phones off, please. We have so much dinging us. We have so much going on at this phase of midlife. It's really no wonder that we see this perfect storm of hormonal, psychological, and social stressors converging. It's what I call the triple fire of midlife insomnia. And this is not just perimenopausal women, right? Since the pandemic, I've seen such a rise in sleep disorders across all ages and in all of my patients. So we have to talk about cortisol and blood sugar and dive a little deeper into that 3 a.m. wake up that so many women experience. So if you find yourself waking at 2 or 3 a.m., unable to fall back asleep, as many of you do, this is often not random. This is your HPA axis responding to an internal stress signal. When your blood sugar dips overnight, cortisol rises to essentially rescue it. Remember, cortisol pulls sugar from your liver. This is called gluconeogenesis, and it can wake you up suddenly with a racing mind or a feeling of anxiety. Some women will feel like they can't catch their breath or that their heart is racing. And this is your body saying, I don't feel safe or nourished enough to rest. If you take one thing home today, it is that your body needs to feel safe in order to rest. What are some of the things that might tell your body it's not safe? Well, caffeine later in the day, alcohol, late meals, and emotional stress can all amplify this cycle. Even a single week of moderate sleep restriction can flatten that cortisol rhythm and cause insulin resistance. So, in order to stabilize this, I'll often recommend that women have a balanced dinner with enough protein, fat, and fiber to keep blood sugar stable through the evening. Definitely avoid higher sugar or higher carb desserts later at night, and definitely avoiding alcohol. Alcohol is going to be really dysregulating to the circadian rhythm and this cortisol pattern, and it is going to cause your blood sugar to drop in the middle of the night and wake you up. If you wake up hungry, try a small protein-rich snack before bed. I'm often recommending a handful of pumpkin seeds and even some tart cherry juice. I'm known to have a couple scoops of peanut butter. Peanut butter is my favorite. And if I wake in the middle of the night, I know that's a sure sign that my blood sugar was dysregulated before bed. As you can see, sleep does not start just when your head hits the pillow, right? It begins in the morning and it is impacted by everything we do throughout the day and leading up to that night. So I'm going to say it again. Sleep starts in the morning. I had a longtime patient check in with me the other day and she wanted to have a little sleep powwow. And one of the first things I said to her was, listen, I recognize that with 3 kids, you're not getting outside in the morning. And she said, Dr. Kelly, you are right. And so that was really the only thing that I recommended she do. Sure, we could talk about herbs that might reduce cortisol. We could talk about her blood sugar. We've already been working on her ferritin, which I think was impacting her sleep previously. But for me, it's really all about these daily habits and really timing and training our circadian rhythm. So I reminded her about our Root to Rise morning routine because you cannot out supplement a routine. And what does that consist of? Well, getting sunlight within 30 minutes of waking. You want to go outside, expose your eyes to sunlight. You want to, yes, be outside. If it's winter and you need your body inside, stick your head out a window. Legit. Get your head outside. Get your retina exposed to the natural sunlight. At least 10 minutes on a clear day, 20 to 30 minutes if it's a cloudier day. If you absolutely cannot do that, yes, I'll use something like light therapy. I have a Bright Mind therapy lamp for the winter, but regardless, every single morning you want to give your body the message that it's time to wake up, it's time to produce cortisol. The easiest, best, most effective way to do that is to get out into the natural sunlight. And then you remember from our hydration episodes that you do want to hydrate right away when you wake up. You want to get that lemon water into your body, activate liver detoxification and digestion, get your bile producing. Certainly you've been resting and digesting throughout the night, but you want to remind your body, hi, I'm awake, I'm ready to receive food. Let's start making our stomach acid and all of our digestive juices. Let's get ready to deal with all the things that come into our body throughout the day. One of the things I love to do during this morning routine is just check in with your body. When I first wake up, even when my eyes are still closed, I'll just notice, was I holding any tension anywhere? Is my jaw tight? Are my shoulders tight? Was I sleeping in an odd, uncomfortable way? And just check in with my nervous system. And the best way I know how to do that is to sense, where am I holding tension? What emotions am I waking up with? And if I have any dreams that are top of mind, I'll write them down in a little dream journal. I definitely recommend you take 1 to 3 minutes to breathe or meditate and ground your nervous system to get ready to deal with the stressors of the day. You can set an intention and you can orient your mind towards safety, calm, and purpose. Again, this morning routine is going to set your hormones up for that evening and for great restful sleep that night. If you're someone that needs a little bit more stimulation in the morning, so if you wake feeling more depressed, your little breathwork practice can be more invigorating or stimulating. You could use something like orange essential oil, which is really uplifting, or splash your face with cold water. Some patients need a little bit more grounding and regulating, and some of you might need a little bit more stimulating in the morning. And then I also reminded her of our shutdown to reboot, our evening routine. These are all in our Seeds of Health journal, right? And that is essentially where you're dimming the lights before bed. Everybody kind of knows, don't be on your screens at night or have some sort of filter or blue light blocking glasses, right? But if you think about overhead lights, they really mimic sunlight. And so I've mentioned this before, but one of my tricks is to turn off the lights at about 7 p.m. in my home. And we just have Christmas tree lights. They're super fun. They're really dim. And even if you can keep them lower in the room versus overhead, it's going to tell your body it's time to settle in, it's time to reduce cortisol production, and it's time to make melatonin. If you're a true crime fan like me, you want to avoid those stimulating things before bed, of course. And ideally, you're really not on a screen before bed. This is a conversation that becomes harder and harder to have with patients because screens are just taking over so many of our lives. But I highly recommend that you get out a journal and you brain dump, or you find a relaxing book to read, or you listen to something relaxing and consider practicing a breath work like a 4-7-8 breath work or box breathing or heart math coherence. What we do before we fall asleep is so impactful. It's just as impactful as our morning routine. You've heard me talk all about those castor oil packs, right? So if you're going to take a few minutes to do a calming breath work or listen to a guided meditation or visualization, it's also a great time to put your castor oil pack on your belly. Maybe consider an Epsom salt bath before that, so you're really getting into that parasympathetic rest and digest state. In most of my patient visits, I'm also recommending yoga nidra or non-sleep deep rest before sleep as well. And your room should be nice and cool. So we want it between 65 and 68 degrees, dark and quiet. So even a little night light or alarm clock light, certainly your phone next to the bed, all of these lights really disrupt our sleep. If you can't get your room dark, then you can consider something over your eyes, like a sleep mask. A lot of patients find that very helpful. And remember that your bed should essentially be for sleep and intimacy only. So you don't want to associate your bed or your bedroom with anything stimulating. You really want to have that be a sanctuary for sleep. So I really want to go a little bit more in depth into something I just mentioned, and that's yoga nidra or non-sleep deep rest. One of my favorite sleep tools, especially for perimenopausal women, especially for women that say they just can't relax, is yoga nidra. This is also known as yogic sleep. Now, this is not about stretching. It's legitimately about surrendering and definitely about feeling safe, relaxing in our body. This is something that can be done at any point throughout the day, or it can be done before sleep. In Yoga Nidra, you lie comfortably in Shavasana and you're guided into a deep relaxation while remaining aware. A 2022 review that you can find on PubMed found that Yoga Nidra improves blood glucose, red blood cell counts, and hormone balance. It enhances cerebral blood flow and dopamine release, and it reduces mild depression and anxiety. It's going to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, lower your heart rate, and increase your heart rate variability, which, as you know, is a direct measure of your nervous system resilience. Just 15 to 30 minutes of yoga nidra or non-sleep deep rest can mimic several hours of deep rest. So you can try it in the afternoon to help wind down, or even if you wake in the middle of the night. I usually link to a couple videos that new patients can get started with right away, but you can easily just search for yoga nidra or non-sleep deep rest on YouTube or Spotify. And essentially, I would recommend that you find a voice that feels safe, a voice that feels soothing to you, and start there. Now, We've talked about some great morning and evening habits and routines and yoga nidra, but if there's something physiological holding your body back from relaxing or sleeping, that's also really important, right? So when sleep doesn't respond to lifestyle changes, or maybe while we're working on those, I'm also going to be digging deeper with patients. So let's talk about some of the common deficiencies that can impact sleep in midlife. I will certainly test for magnesium. Remember, we always run red blood cell magnesium, but I might also supplement with magnesium glycinate or threonate for sleep. I'm going to look at iron and ferritin. Remember, low ferritin can often cause restless legs and poor sleep. We're going to look at B vitamin status, so especially B12, B6, and folate. So we're going to consider methylation and neurotransmitter synthesis, and these B vitamins are really important for all of these processes and for sleep in and of itself. We're going to consider vitamin D levels. So low levels of vitamin D are linked to poor sleep efficiency and certainly hormone dysregulation. So, as you know, I do like to look at progesterone and estrogen levels and consider the role that they're playing in our sleep quality. We're definitely going to talk about that cortisol curve, right? So, we might run a saliva panel where we're looking at 4 points of cortisol throughout the day. So, I can actually see what does your cortisol curve look like and potentially even measure your melatonin production levels. So, some patients might need some melatonin support, especially if they're older. Melatonin production decreases. I don't tend to like to rely on taking something like melatonin every night, but as we're retraining that circadian rhythm, it's absolutely a tool that I might consider using. And then we're going to always look into our thyroid function, right? So subclinical hypothyroidism can show up as sleep disturbances or even hyperthyroidism. And we're absolutely going to look at insulin, glucose, hemoglobin A1C. So again, blood sugar dysregulation, hypoglycemia, all of these are going to play a role in our sleep. So you can go back to the lab interpretation guides and some of the labs that we've talked about in previous episodes and check in on some of those levels. But again, labs that we might consider when sleep is disrupted would be estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, DHEA, a full cortisol curve, a full thyroid panel, glucose, insulin, ferritin, vitamin D, your B vitamins. And you also want to rule out things like sleep apnea, especially if you're snoring or gasping in the middle of the night. It's something that's really underdiagnosed in women through perimenopause and menopause. So, if you've heard from a partner that you are gasping or kind of making odd sounds at night, there's a chance that you do have sleep apnea. So, you might consider going in for a sleep study to evaluate that. And then, as we're looking for some physiological root causes to our sleep disturbances, we might consider botanicals or nutrients for support. So, I mentioned a couple already, such as magnesium, but some of the herbs that I love to use for sleep are going to be lemon balm, really soothing for anxiety. I use Melissa or lemon balm often when I'm dealing with a high viral load in a patient, too, or sometimes digestive tension. Chamomile is a gentle nervine, it's also gut calming. You know, I love passion flower, passiflora, which enhances GABA and supports sustained sleep. I might use ashwagandha to balance cortisol rhythms. I'll often use kava, especially if I find that that patient is struggling with relaxing muscularly or releasing emotional tension. If we're weaning off of alcohol, for example, I might use a kava tea or tincture to get some of that relaxation effect, or maybe some vervain with that and kind of let those shoulders feel nice and loose. I'll often use lavender. So that might be in a capsule, it might be lavender essential oil, it might be a tea. I will consider things like phosphatidylserine. So, especially if I'm looking to lower nighttime cortisol, and I might consider theanine for GABA support. There's so many different calming nutrients and herbs that we might use. And as with everything that we do at Roots Deep Medicine, it's not one size fits all. So I definitely like to look for any physiological reason why a patient might not be sleeping or might be waking up. We want to optimize those lifestyle strategies around sleep. And then one of my favorite tools for sleep is going to be homeopathy. So, homeopathy really works as subtle medicine for the subconscious. And it works through the principle of similar or like cures like. So we use minute, really, really dilute doses of a natural substance that in a healthy person might produce similar symptoms. But in someone who's depleted or dysregulated, that dilute dose is going to nudge the vital force back to balance. It kind of works from the inside out. And in cases of insomnia, especially when the mind is overactive or there's that racing, excited, inspired energy that keeps us up at night, one of my favorite remedies to use is called coffea cruda. So, homeopathic coffea is made from the raw coffee bean. Paradoxically, it's not stimulating in the homeopathic form, it's a regulator. So, it's for that woman who lies awake at night and her thoughts are spinning and her heart is racing and she's hypersensitive to noise or sensation. You might feel almost excited or creative or euphoric at night, but unable to turn that off. And definitely, if a woman describes that they're wired but exhausted and that their nervous system has that wired, tired feeling, coffee is so great for that. And often these women will say, I get my best ideas at night, right? Or I replay conversations over and over at night. Some other remedies that I might use would be Nux vomica for the more irritable, overworked, overstimulated from caffeine, alcohol, and screens. I might consider arsenicum album for more restless anxiety, driving your sleep disturbances. Arsenicums are more perfectionistic and they fear loss of control. They have a lot of fear around their health. I might consider Ignatia for insomnia after grief, disappointment, or emotional shock. And again, I might consider Passiflora homeopathic as well. I'll often use passion flower drops or a combo of Passiflora and sepia in women that are having trouble sleeping. So again, this is super individualized and nuanced, but essentially dilute amounts of a substance, which is so cool. The energy medicine of homeopathy can really help to stimulate our vis or vital force into sleep. And when chosen well, homeopathy doesn't sedate you, so it's also a great option if you have little kids at home and you have to be able to wake up. It helps your body remember how to sleep. It reminds your vital force that peace is possible, you are safe, and sleep can come. Now, in the sleep seed of health, I also include relaxation and play. Why do I do that? Well, play is medicine, and when we're able to play and when we're able to relax, we're typically also able to initiate sleep. So I'll often hear from women who struggle with sleep that they also don't have any joy, they don't have time for play, and they definitely do not know how to relax. Now, if you remember from some of the conversations we've had about nervous system states and polyvagal theory, play is essentially when we're both activating parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system states. So it's usually a sign of a really healthy nervous system that's able to regulate and go in and out of dysregulation. And laughter and joy are biochemical antidotes to chronic stress. They increase oxytocin and they downshift cortisol. I love this quote from Brene Brown. She says, if we want to live a wholehearted life, we have to become intentional about cultivating rest and play. And we must work to let go of exhaustion as a status symbol and productivity as self-worth. Right? That's a good one. So ask yourself, when was the last time I truly played? When did I last dance, laugh, or create without an agenda? Louise Hay's mirror work, which I talk about a lot, invites us to say, I'm willing to love and accept my inner child. This is an exercise that you can even do in front of the mirror to start to get comfortable with some of these phrases or engaging with that inner child a little bit more. And that child within you really still longs for joy, for rest, for moments of wonder and awe, right? Cultivating play is not frivolous. It's a path back to safety. And it's teaching our body, you're safe. You can experience joy. You can play. You can relax. All of that is foundational for healthy sleep. I actually have 3 books in front of me right now. One is called Inciting Joy. One is called The Woman's Book of Joy. And this one's really good, The Chemistry of Joy. I have these out because I have patients almost every single day where we're talking about this lack of joy in midlife. It's this elusive feeling or state, right? And so I just wanted to mention that if you struggle with sleep, chances are you probably also struggle with joy or laughter. And I'm not saying it's always easy to cultivate these feelings, especially when we have a lot going on in our lives at midlife, right? So we have to carve out time. We have to participate in rituals to enhance the experience of midlife, essentially, and give our body a signal that we are safe to experience these feelings of joy or to relax, right? So let's integrate some of what we've covered today. So, sleep is foundational to healing, right? It's our nightly return to parasympathetic rest, digest, and heal. We talked about some rituals that help to engage a healthy circadian rhythm pattern. So that's getting morning sunlight, our root to rise routine. It's in our Seeds of Health journal. Having a protein forward dinner and avoiding alcohol ideally, and definitely avoiding caffeine after 12 or 1 p.m. We talked about dimming lights and reducing screen time 1 to 2 hours before bed. That bright light is actually going to reduce melatonin production, right? We talked about some calming rituals. Maybe it's a breathwork practice or an Epsom salt bath, castor oil packs, yoga nidra. I talked about keeping your room cool and dark and quiet. And just remember that this is not about perfection. It is about rhythm. Your body loves rhythm. It loves these gentle, rhythmic reminders that align with nature. And sleep is not a luxury. I really want one of the take homes to be that you remember sleep is key. Sleep is foundational. It's how we restore health, it's how we prepare our body for the next day. It's how we have healthy hormones, our circadian rhythm, our HPA axis. This is all so foundational. That's why I had that 2-part deep dive episode on the topic. When you reclaim your sleep and your circadian rhythm, you reclaim your vitality, your joy, and your ability to live life fully human and deeply healed. So, in the show notes, you'll find my perimenopause sleep and circadian rhythm checklist. As always, you can download my free vagal tone guide that has exercises to help your body get into that rest and digest parasympathetic. And you can always download your free Seeds of Health journal so you can follow along with us. As always, I would love and appreciate if you would download and subscribe the podcast episode and share with a friend who's maybe struggling with sleep. And stay tuned for next week. I'm thinking it might be fun to talk about the pineal gland and go even more in depth into light, darkness, and the alchemy of dreams, maybe some Jungian psychoanalysis in there. I love that. But until then, may your sleep be deep, your mornings be bright, and your spirit well rested. Have a great day.